Okay, second video, the specified model. So this is like the mathematical model. So what have we got? We've got a bunch of equations. So maybe I'll do it live. So we've got y is ALL to the 1 minus alpha, r to the alpha. So that's just Cobb-Douglas, and this is like the Cole, or it's going to be R is R1 plus R2 kind of thing. But then we add to that e to the minus p to the phi. So what's this? P is pollution. If P is 0, this is 1, so there's no damage. As P goes up, this becomes less than 1, yeah? And the bigger P gets, the closer to 0 this gets. So it's knocking out a proportion of the value of your baseline production. So this is like baseline production, and this is after pollution damages. Okie doke. And then we've got some growth going on exogenously. And what have we got? We've got R is just the sum of some D's. So what are the D's? The D's are alternative resource inputs, and they're perfectly substitutable. So it's like epsilon is 1 in our CES model. Yep, they're perfect substitutes. We just add them up. And pollution is also the sum of the D's. Sorry, I have J's for some reason. Can't remember why. Pollution is also the sum of the D's, but here with normalized units here so that they're all equally productive, we can't then normalize these units. For pollution, then the degree to which each input is polluting differs, and that's this psi. And each unit costs Wj. So that can differ. So what's going to happen? We can interpret alternative technologies, just like alternative inputs, coal, oil, gas, solar. You could also think of high sulfur coal, low sulfur coal. You could also think of high sulfur coal plus flue gas desulfurization. You could have one of your technologies, one of your J's could be an end of pipe cleanup, like flue gas desulfurization on a coal-fired electricity plant, which would be raising the cost and diminishing emissions. Okay, I think that's pretty straightforward. You can look at that for yourselves. My voice is getting tired. We denote the aggregate production net of extraction costs as Z. So Z is Y. That was Y, wasn't it? Z is Y minus W, the sum over J of Wj dj. Is that right? Is that what I got there? Yeah. And P, this P, of course, we've got that. Yeah, okay, so we need all the, that's the R, that's the P, and this is Z, allowing for the costs. Now, let's assume there's two, that J is either 1 or 2. So we've got D1 and D2. What are the first order conditions for the social planner? How much D1 should the planner use and how much D2 should the planner use? So we want to the planner wants to maximize Z. Yep, so it's not a profit maximization problem now. It's just about maximizing Z, isn't it? So we want dz for an internal optimum. We want dz d1 to be naught. But actually, we need to be a bit careful because these two inputs are perfect substitutes. We might not always have an internal optimum. We might just use one and not the other, and then we're in a corner. So we're not going to put these equal to naught right now. Well, actually, we are, if I look at the notes, but we still need to bear in mind that we might end up at a corner. So dz dd1 equals naught. How does that play out? So we need dy dd1. And there's d1s in here, aren't there? So it's alpha y over r. And then we go inside. dr dd1 is just 1. So we have alpha y over r, which is d1 plus d2. Okay. And what else have we got? We've got d1's here. So we've got minus w1. That's it, isn't it? Yeah. w1, d1 differentiated. So it's minus w1. But we also have d1's here. So how do we differentiate, for instance, d by dx of, or sorry, yeah, d by dp of e to the minus p to the 5. We can say, well, it's d by d, no. I'm going to pause. I just got to think how I want to explain this. I'm just going to pause. Okay, a new plan. I decided to say right like this. So let's say we've got y. This isn't that y, yeah. This is just some made up y. Y is e to the minus p5. What is dy by dp? We can basically, if we call p to the phi x, if we say y is e to the minus x, what is dy by, and x is p to the phi. Then we can say that dy by dp is dy by dx by dp. Okay, so dy by dx is minus y, isn't it? And dx by dp is phi p to the phi minus 1. For once, I'm not differentiating like the economist there. So dy by dp is minus y phi p to the phi minus 1. So we have minus y phi p to the phi minus 1. That lot is all equal to naught, so we can write equals plus. Okay. So let me write this. So that's the first order condition for D1, an internal solution with D1 being used. Let me just check it's the same as on the notes. Not. Oh, yeah, because then we need to say it's not by dp, it's by the d1. So then we need a further term in that thing that I just wiped off. dy by dd1, oh, I'll do it again. dy by dd1 would be dy by the x by the p by the d1. And what's dp by the d1? It's psi1, isn't it? P by the d1. So we end up with a psi1 there as well. Now it should be looking the same. Phi psi1 y times p to the phi minus 1. Phi psi1 y p to the phi minus 1. Yeah, and that should be capital Y. Okay. So that's how you differentiate e to the minus b to the phi. And the first order condition in D2 by symmetry, we have alpha y over D1 plus D2 equals W2 plus Y phi P to the phi minus 1 psi 2. So where do these expressions differ from each other? Not very much, do they? They differ here and here. So how is this going to pan out? These expressions say the marginal benefit of using this input D1, that's this, the extra production, is equal to marginal costs, which is the sum of the cost of digging it out of the ground plus the damages. And it's the same for D2. On the benefit side, the expressions are identical. On the cost side, they differ. It's the sum of extraction costs, or the cost of the technology, and the damage costs. Let's see what the notes. Yeah, so then it's just a little bit hand wavy. But, oh, I think this case is super straightforward, actually. Start with the case in which input 1 is cheaper and cleaner. Then we'll never use this. And like I said, we're going to have corner solutions in this. Yeah, we can say intuitively straight away, we're just never going to use input 2, are we? They're perfect substitutes. One of them's cheaper and cleaner. You're always just going to use the cheaper and cleaner one. So then it's this, and then basically that logic I talked about before is going to kick in. If y is small, then this is going to be small, and we end up with this expression. And this is alpha y is W1 R. We can wipe the D2s at W1 D1, and we have D1. W1 is constant. D1 grows with the growth rate. But when y gets big, this gets, sorry, we're still up here. When y gets big, this gets big compared to this, and we can cancel the y's, and instead we have that p to the phi minus 1 is constant. Oh, and yeah, we need to convert this up. We bring this up. We end up with p is constant. It's actually alpha over phi to the 1 over phi. Because this, yeah, if when D2 is 0, bring the D1 up, we have psi1 D1, which is just p. So we have p to the phi minus 1 times p. We end up with p to the phi here. And then once you cancel things and shift around, you get p to the phi is alpha over phi. So p is alpha over phi to the 1 over phi. So that's how you get that pollution path with that growth path. But then the fun starts when we say that D2, the second resource, is more expensive but cleaner. But let's just follow the notes. I think the notes are reasonably good here. The shadow price, the polluting input, is the sum. So when y is small, the shadow price is equal to the constant extraction cost, both resource use and polluting emissions track growth. As y increases, da 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 da. So you have a transition. Yeah, so that's what I've talked you through already. So we'll go on to the next slide. Now we take the more interesting case when technology 2 is more expensive. Oh, but with making it nice and simple, we're saying psi 2 is actually 0. In this case, as y increases, the increasing importance of pollution damages these terms, well, this term, because this one's 0. The increasing importance of this term does not just lead to pollution abatement within technology 1, i.e. less use of D1, but it narrows the gap between the costs of D1 and the costs of D2. At some point, they become equal and we start switching from D1 to D2. We get an internal solution and we start using this input as well as this one. And as we transition, because of these nonlinear damages, the damages go down and that keeps them equal. And this is basically how it plays out in a parameterized model, just with some made up parameters. Here we have 3 alternative technologies, the third of which is totally clean. So we start just by using technology 1, then we have a transition period where we transition to technology 2, then we just use technology 2, and then we start transitioning to 3, the clean one. So this process of moving to clean technology and reducing pollution, it doesn't have to be that simple. Yeah, it can be more complicated. It could even be like this. Yeah, you could have a temporary improvement and then things could get worse again for a long time, maybe forever. But if there's a perfectly clean technology, it will be chosen at some point in the model. Okay. Do I want to take you through this? Nah. This is closer to the paper. I don't think I'm going to take you through this. Have a look at the paper if you're interested. It's quite a tough read. But this is super nice. Okay, this is super nice. So maybe I'll just pause and clean up and draw this because this is, I want to talk about it. Okay, so what have we got here? We've got a graph showing it's like different kinds of costs, and on the vertical axis, I'm going to label the individual curves rather than the whole axis. Because, and it's not logged, okay. So we've got GDP per capita doing this. Dollars per year. Oh, it says it's per cap, well, GDP per capita in dollars per year. And then what have we got? We've got how much does it cost to drive a typical passenger car a kilometer on unleaded petrol? And that is a flat line. Okay. So this is basically the petrol price stays the same. Admittedly, the cars should get more efficient, but at the same time, we choose bigger cars. So the price of driving a kilometer using unleaded petrol stays the same. And this is without any regulation. Yeah. What about from about 1920 someone discovered around about then that if we put tetraethyl lead, basically lead, into petrol, motors run better, we can get further per litre of petrol. So therefore, the price of driving a kilometre is lower with leaded. And that is, of course, allowing for the cost of adding the lead. You know, when it's all added together, it's cheaper to drive around with lead in your petrol than without. Okay, you save on petrol costs because you can tune up your motor better to run more efficiently. Okay, what's the downside? The downside is that all this lead ends up in the atmosphere. And what does it do there? Well, one of the things it does is cause brain damage to your kids. Okay. And you might think, well, that would be a no-brainer. You should never add lead to your petrol. Why would you do that? Just to save a bit of money, and you're causing brain damage to your kids. Well, I would have a tendency to agree with you, but despite the fact that the poisonous effects of lead were well known, even to the Romans, I think, we chose still to let people add the lead to the petrol. Everyone did it across the globe. So what can we say about the willingness to pay? So this is, I'm trying to show, this is supposed to be that gap. So what's that? It's the cost premium of going to unleaded, isn't it? If you switch to unleaded, this is how much it costs you in dollars per kilometer. But what is the cost to society of the lead emitted from that kilometer? Presumably, for a long time, it was lower than the cost premium of switching to unleaded. That's why we didn't switch. But as GDP rises, based on this kind of logic, the willingness to pay to stop that each unit of lead from each kilometer driven, remember this is per kilometer, so this is willingness to pay per lead emitted from that kilometer. It should go up, shouldn't it? Like GDP, it should go up exponentially. But at some point, this stays constant, this grows exponentially. At some point, we're going to switch. We're going to say, look, this is crazy. We're causing brain damage to our kids to save a few cents per kilometer, or even not, maybe not even a few cents. Yeah, a cent or half a cent, or I don't know. Less, yeah, 0.1 of a cent per kilometer probably. Let's switch to unleaded. And this is what we did eventually. When did we do it? Around about 1990. When should we have done it? Okay, if we'd properly been measuring the social costs, if this is the social cost of lead, so to speak, if we'd been measuring it properly and acting at the right time, we probably should have done it in like 1930 or something, or maybe 1950 anyway, for sure, when car driving started reaching significant levels that the lead emissions were getting significant and significantly affecting our kids. We were probably here already. But it took another 30 years, and the damages then were way higher than the benefits from using the lead, I would argue, before we finally got around to regulating. And this is the sort of inbuilt tröghet, the like, how do you say that in English? The like inbuilt sort of delays, lags in the system, the political system, do, I would argue, with the lobbying power of business and so on, that big firms have got a lot of money invested in this lead. Adding lead to petrol is tough for politicians to actually like get their act together and do something about it. But eventually they do. And of course, this is what we're seeing today with climate change. We should be all the analysis are showing, like, we're in Sweden, we're more or less in line with what the economic consensus is saying that we should be doing. But in the rest, most of the rest of the world, or certainly outside the EU, we're way behind what the economic consensus would say is the sort of optimal, best way to deal with climate change. Why is that? Among other things, it's the power of the fossil lobby. Okay. So the point isn't that growth solves everything. The point is that growth raises our willingness to pay for a clean environment. If and when the government actually responds to that, we will clean up if the clean alternatives are out there. Are the clean alternatives out there? We'll maybe talk about that in a study question. Okay, yeah, so I'll leave the rest to study questions, and that's me done for today. Thanks.